Namaskar and welcome to our webinar series on COVID-induced rural distress. Today's webinar is the second in the series and will focus on rebooting rural economy, grassroots perspective. As you know, certain restrictions were lifted yesterday and more are likely on May 3. So we thought this was probably an opportune time to discuss various aspects associated with rebooting the rural economy. Just quick introduction for our new participants who have joined today. My name is Vinay Kumar and I'm from Transforming Rural India Foundation, an organization that mobilizes the dynamics and processes of Bazaar, Samaj and Sarkar, the community, the state and the market to create a deep and durable impact on the multidimensional nature of poverty in the poorest 1 lakh villages of India. With me is Sanjeev Kunsalkar. He's my co-host. Welcome, Sanjeev.
Hello. Welcome.
And Sanjeev leads Vikas Anvesh Foundation, a serious research organization that works at the very grassroots for sustainable impact. Sanjeev is also the chair of our board at Transforming Rural India Foundation. This webinar series is being organized in partnership with Village Square, which is an effort really to galvanize national discourse on rural India by bringing stories of the villages, their successes, angst, and dreams. Friends, our first webinar was on COVID-induced rural distress, the role of the citizen. 4 speakers from different parts of the country provided a grounded view of how serious the situation was in rural India and what the steps were being taken to reduce this hardship. I think what came out pretty strongly was that a large number of CBOs and community-based organizations and civil society organizations of all types were playing a very crucial role and have in fact been the first responders in alleviating distress. However, they are below the radar both for public policy and for citizens in general. The webinar also brought out a strong collaboration with which civil society organizations were working with government efforts across the country. And this was great news, particularly in this situation. And as for the roles of the citizens, they could play a major role, it was pointed out, by directly participating in the activities or supporting the CBOs in their areas in whatever capacity or form they were comfortable in. And whichever CBO they thought was authentic and was doing great work. And yes, by following the protocols and staying safe. Friends, today we would be talking about how do we get restarted in the rural economy. And we'd like to understand the immediate relief measures that might be required to restart the rural economy, whether it's about agriculture production, the input and output market linkages, the current situation with livestock-related activities, the issues of migrant labor. We've received a number of questions with regard to migrant labor and how we can possibly enhance farmers' resilience to withstand such adversities. To discuss these and related issues, we have 4 experts with experience in different aspects of rural economy. I'm delighted to welcome Ashok Kumar. Ashok is the Director of Agriculture at TRIF, Transforming Rural India Foundation. Hi, Ashok. Ashish Mondal, he is the founder and director at Action for Social Advancement. I've had the privilege of working with both of them, and we hope to hear from you. Sanjeev Asthana, Managing Partner, iFarm Venture Advisors. Hi, Sanjeev.
Hello. My video is not starting for some reason. It has been switched off at the host level. So, but am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Okay.
And Sanjeev Kumar, founder and advisor that GoTrust. So welcome. And I just noted that we have three Sanjeevs on our virtual dais. One is my co-host and two speakers. So yeah. And just a couple of points about hygiene. We'll have this session for about an hour and a half. Each speaker will speak for about 7 to 8 minutes, after which we will post some questions. Some of these would be from the questions that we've already received, and there will be some questions which Sanjeev will be asking and will putting to each speaker. After all the speakers have spoken, there will be time for discussion and we'll take some questions from the audience. So let's get started. I request Sanjeev to introduce the speakers and yeah, take it forward. Thank you. Sanjeev.
Thank you, Vinayji, and welcome to the 228 participants. We are really overwhelmed. We thank you for participating in our event, and we hope that we will be able to, all of us together will be able to bring out some salient aspects pertaining to the disruptions that have been caused by this unwarranted situation of lockdown to the rural economy, and can bring out some pointers which can help both the farmers and other people in the rural areas. I'm going to talk first with Mr. Ashok Kumar, who is my colleague in Transform Rural India Foundation. Ashok Kumar is based in Ranchi and has close connection with farmers in over 20 odd districts in Jharkhand and also in Madhya Pradesh, where he supports the livelihoods related work of Transform Rural India Foundation. And Ashok is an agriculture expert. He has several papers to his credit and is a very good expert in agronomy and coming up with package of practices for crops which are ideal for the region. And he has recently developed the package for optimizing the kind of land and water resources for farmers to maximize their income in their respective locale. So Ashok, welcome, and I'll ask you to please share your views. Jharkhand has been, Jharkhand is not particularly strong in terms of agricultural contribution to the economy because it is a plateau, the soils are not very good and so on. But it is very good in terms of contribution to horticulture, the vegetables production in the country. And this is the peak vegetable marketing season. And you have, I know, have been working in production of watermelon and so on. You have done on a great scale in Jharkhand. But all those marketing links have been snapped because of the lockdown and the disruption in transportation. So, and also it's a big state which contributes to migrant labor outside. And migrants are either returning or they're stuck wherever they are. So there is a big disruption. So Ashok, will you please enlighten the audience about the kind of disruption which you are facing, the kind of steps you people are taking, and what can be done to alleviate? Ashok, over to you.
Thank you, Sanjeev. And basically, I'll be talking not only about Jharkhand. I will be sharing the stories from MP as well as in Jharkhand, and I would like to share what is going on using some live cases. We are closely working and interacting with the farmers. And to help my points, I would like to share a few of my slides with you that may be helpful. I'll be talking about some live cases and some farmers with whom we are interacting since last few days. Like one farmer is Mr. Tarsing Hathila. He's from Chavaria village of Thandla block, Madhya Pradesh. He's sitting with his fresh harvest of 4.5 tons of wheat. And the challenges Mr. Hathila is facing is no labor, no vehicle, and very less price by the local trade. Like the local traders are providing about 11 rupee a kilo for the wheat he has harvested. And though the mandis are open, but presently due to the restrictions, mandis are taking only 6 registered farmers per day who are allowed in the mandi to sell their produce. And since labor was in shortage, he have used harvester to harvest his wheat, and due to the reason now there is a shortage of fodder, because the fodder comes out of the harvester. Cattle are not very fond of eating that. So this is another challenge he's facing. Our next farmer was Mr. Hari Singh Machar. He is a very good vegetable farmer in Vani village of Petlawad block in Madhya Pradesh. Again, he has changed his cropping pattern, and he has grown around 25 tons of watermelons. So he is sitting with ready to sell around 25 tons of this produce. Now the challenge he is facing is transports and no traders. And there is a little consumption because it is a bulky material. 25 tons are too big a volume to be consumed in a local market. At the same time, people are having of the opinion that watermelon can create cold and it may lead to corona. So they are reducing the consumption of these kind of fruits or vegetables. Is another social challenge is facing. Yeah, hello.
Sir, can you make it full screen?
Okay.
Can you make it full screen? Yeah.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Thank you. And third is Mr. Bheri Madhu Solanki. He is from Sultanpura village. As he is a diverse vegetable farmer sitting with 11 tons of freshly harvested vegetables, facing the same problem, no movement and no local transport. At the same time, he tried to take his vegetables from village to village on a motorbike to sell it. But in the villages, the roads are blocked and he is not able to reach to the villages. So he's sitting with all his produce and don't know what to do with that. Another vegetable farmer is from Manawar block in Dhar district of Madhya Pradesh. And he's also having the same problem of not able to sell the produce. Another thing he mentioned that it will be his crop is still standing. A lot of production is still to come from the field, but he's facing difficulty because he's not able to purchase inputs from the market. It is all closed, and it is very difficult to go to the markets. And there is a labor shortage. Nobody is working in the field, so the field operations are affected. At the same time, he is also facing a problem of summer cotton. He is a farmer who has planned to grow summer cottons, but the seeds are not yet arrived in the market. And he is wondering what to do with this summer cotton crop he was supposed to grow. So these are the four cases kind of, and the similar situation, these are all smallholders and the similar situation everywhere, be it Jharkhand or Odisha or Madhya Pradesh or Jharkhand, everywhere farmers are facing similar kind of problem. So now let us think, if are these only four farmers, and what is the nature of these farmers and what is the scale at India level? There are some of the photographs of these farmers who are sitting with their produce, and many of them have donated to the different NGOs who are doing food supply. So they are even distributing their produce through different organizations who are supporting, who are doing ration distribution. Now coming to the bigger picture. So if we talk about the pan-India, this is the kind of picture that emerges. Out of these rural households, there are about 54 million growers, cultivators, and 93 million people are there who do kind of manual and casual laborers. Their livelihood is dependent on this activity. There are about 4.5 million of household workers. They work in different houses to earn their livelihoods. And about 3 million people who do other kind of work like driving and loading, unloading, these kind of non-agricultural small enterprises. They're dependent for their livelihoods. About 6 million people are there who are depending on begging or charities, and about 4 million of rag pickers. And there are other 2.5 million people depending on other activities. So in a nutshell, these are the people who are worst affected because everything is shut down and their business is at stake. There are no income for them. And when we consider about the individual household, what are the different share of activities from that livelihood, their income is coming. So here we clearly see that about 80% of the income is coming from cultivation as well as wages and salary that they earn from doing kind of a manual work. And another area is the livestock. About 11.9% of their income is coming from livestock. And this is another area which is hugely affected due to the lockdown. We are all hearing about the story of poultry growers or the people who are doing dairy or small livestock rearers like goat rearers. I think Sanjeev will educate us more about this sector, how these things are going to be affected. So this is where these smallholder farmers are and the rural households are, and they are earning their incomes from different activities. So in nutshell, the challenges what they are facing is the casual wages. So it contributes about 40% of cash income, and it has gone due to this lockdown. And now they are depending on the little reserves that they have, or they are dependent on the support from government and civil society. Civil society they are getting. The second challenge is very soon the migrants will be back here. Okay.
Hello.
So the migrants will come back, and earlier years they were coming back with their earnings to invest in next farming season. But this time they are coming with empty pockets and with very settled assurance that what they will do next, whether they will stay in the villages or need to go back. So it is going to be a big problem, big challenge for these rural areas. Another prospect of earning from a small amount of cash is also gone, because many of the smallholder farmers or surplus farmers, they were growing some vegetables and some cash crops, and this is the time when they sell and earn some income. But it is also gone due to the lockdown and movement restrictions. At the same time, the consumption in the local market is also low. We are all locked down in our houses and we are consuming much less than what we used to. And March, April was the peak season when these high value crops like flowers, vegetables, watermelons, mangoes, jackfruit, tamarind, these were all being cultivated or harvested from the forest or the fields. And it was the source of income for many of these smallholder farmers. So these are all gone because the uptake in the terminal market is very negligible. Even there are no takers. Like in Ranchi, the green chilies are sold at even 8 rupees per kilogram, but there are no takers. There are no traders who are coming and picking them up. But if you consider the last year prices, this time general prices were about 80 to 100 rupees a kilo. Now it is about 8 rupees a kilo. So, and the next earning season for these farmers is about 6 months away. When the kharif crops will be harvested, only then the next income is going to come. So it is really a very difficult time ahead for these smallholders or these rural communities. The Rabi harvest, as we seen, as I said about different cases, there is a very high labor cost, and they are still waiting to sell because there is still mandis are not operating at full place. And this all will lead to investment into kharif season will be reduced, and I am afraid that due to less investment, the output will be also much reduced. Then some of the farmers said about labor scarcity during kharif, because many of the migrant laborers who used to work in the fields will go back to their respective villages. So in many places there will be a scarcity of manual labor in the farming. The similar time, farmers are very much afraid of constrained supply for the kharif season, because a lot of seeds are required to be and all inputs required to be moved to the from the production site to the remote villages, and this movement of input is still unpredictable, and it is not there. Another thing that we are experiencing in the villages is panic and stigma associated with the people coming from outside. Whether a person from one village is going to other village, there are roadblocks, and there is a lot of fear among people that perhaps they are carrying the pathogen. And some people who have been successful to come back and try to enter to the villages, there is still a lot of stigma, and the people don't want to come, and even they are forced to stay outside villages. And even there are some stories of kind of a quarrel between them. 2 days back in a district in Khunti, suddenly there was a rumor in the night that some women from the other villages have come to their villages, and everybody was out of their homes and frantically looking for who has come. Then later on, police arrived and they arrested some people there. Why during the lockdown you are outside on the road? So there is a environment of very hostility and panic in the villages, and distress and fear is there. While in previous years, when the migrant people used to come, everybody welcomed them because they used to come with the money and some investment for their household. So these all have changed due to the current situation. So in nutshell, these are the challenges that we are experiencing in rural areas. Now, while talking to these farmers, some of the ideas came from them that what are the opportunities, even what can be done in such a difficult times. So one thing emerged very strongly that we should do everything so that no one goes hungry. So we need to continue the relief work for food and shelter, even protecting them from infection, and communication to stay away from the contamination. And it is very important to protect the little reserve at home so that they can be good for coming 4-5 months. Second very important thing is to fix the broken supply chains. They are all broken. So how it can be fixed so that whatever produce is there, it can be picked up, it can be sold out, or it can go away to different places for consumption. A lot of local entrepreneurs can be very useful in that area, in the villages. Some agri entrepreneurs or some value chain actors in the villages, they can be helpful to aggregate and make them attractive for the markets. When slowly the lockdown will open up and the demand from cities and distant places will start.
Ashokji, you might like to quickly wind up because your point.
Just this is my last slide.
Right.
And the cash in hands for the producers, some grant support and some easy credit needs to be there. Accelerated Manrega activities so that they can have some manual labor and some earning in the village itself. Now the guidelines have come how to Manrega work can be started in the villages. Another important thing I think we need to address here is the skill mapping and activity-based funding, because a lot of skilled people are also returning and they might like to stay in the villages. So if some skill mapping can be done with them and some activity-based funding can be ensured so that they can contribute to the local economy. And one more thing, I understand that we need to enhance the digital skills of all the migrant labor, because this time all this we are all communicating with each other and accessing help due to our access to digital technology. So I think this is a kind of a new capacity building area coming out, so that they can be good when there are some distresses, or even use this kind of digital technology and digital skills for their own benefits. Thank you. This is what I need to say, and some glimpses of what is happening out there in the field.
Ashokji, terrific. I mean, really very insightful comments which you have made. I want to ask you two questions, pertaining to what you said. One was, you talked about cash support and credit which should be made available to people. You have this Garib Kalyan Yojana where so much money is supposed to be put and food is supposed to be given and so on. Now, I'm told that there is a lot of queuing for collecting that 1,000 rupees or whatever the government has announced for them. Now, in this kind of an environment, when banks are stressed actually just to delivering that cash, what is the situation on credit planning? Is there anybody? Normally the NABARD and the associated banks come up with credit plans and people submit them, and investment credit or crop loans, etc. start moving around this time. What is the situation on that front? Is there anything moving? That's first question. The second question is, you talked about migrants. So the situation about that is quite varied. In some regions, migrants are returning. In some regions, migrants are not wanted and so on. So what is happening? You talked about labor shortage. And I thought when migrants returned after a trauma, they would remain back. So how can there be a shortage? Well, can you clarify that a little bit?
Yeah. First thing, Sanjeev said about access to credit. Presently, yes, some money is being transferred to the people, and now people are queuing up for accessing these 500 or 1,000 odd rupees there. And there was some rumor that they need to withdraw the money as soon as possible, otherwise it will go away. So a lot of people came and they just crowded the banks, and banks had really difficult times to handle such a crowd in there. So there is a lot of miscommunication there. And second thing, like in Jharkhand now, government has started transferring about 1,000 rupees to the migrant labor account. And for that, they have developed a specialized app. So this app can be used by about more than 3.5 lakh laborers stuck in different places. And they're trying to use this app to upload their bank accounts and their Aadhaar number and other details so that they can access this money. But it is again not working. We were learning that they're facing a lot of difficulties in accessing that money. So in that way, it is not very effective about accessing finances. And about agricultural credit, I don't think, I'm not seeing any movement out there in the field, because people are still waiting, and not much of any encouragement for that. No communication is going out from the banks, either from bank side or the government side, that you can go and ask for more money, or you can get collateral free loans and stuff. So announcements are there, but not much of kind of systems there, how you can access this money at this point of time.
About labor, you were saying something?
Yeah, about labor, we are experiencing two kind of situation. One is the place where, like in Jharkhand, a lot of migrant labor will come back and they will perhaps stay in the villages. And during this Kharif time, there might be oversupply of laborers because they will come and they will stay in the villages. But while in the villages like in Indore and Dhar area, where a lot of migrants used to come and work. So some of the farmers like in Gujarat, area of MP that is supported, that is nearby Gujarat, they are saying that we'll be facing a lot of labor challenge this year because all the migrant labor is gone. So the both situation will emerge.
Thank you, Ashokji. I'm now going to shift to Ashish. Ashish, as Vinay, you were saying, heads the NGO called Action for Social Advancement. He also is closely associated with the largest and the most successful farmer producer organization named Madhya Bharat Farmer Producer Organization based out of Bhopal, and dealing with I think some 20 odd districts and engaging mostly in seed production and seed supply and of course other issues of farmers. So Ashish is singularly well placed to tell us about the situation on the input supply side. Ashok hinted that input supply is currently crippled and nothing is happening on the ground. So Ashish, will you tell us about what is the situation, particularly regarding seeds? Because this is a peak time for seed supply. Of course, you will also enlighten the participants about what is happening out there in Madhya Pradesh and other areas where you are working. But I would like you to focus particularly on seeds and along with that share other things. Thank you.
Sanjeev, can I just, one sec. I just want to let everyone know that we will be putting up the email IDs of all the panelists, and it's a request.
Hello.
Also, to this, if there are some you want to respond while we are continuing. Yeah, thank you, Ashish.
Yeah, Ashish.
Hello. Good evening. I understand that all of you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can.
Okay, good. And thank you very much, Sanjeev and the TRIF, VF, Village Square for this opportunity. And thank you, audience. There are about 270 people who have joined. That's great. I just wanted to say a couple of things, which just to set the context. I think Ashok has brilliantly set the context for the today's discussion about the current situation.
Yeah.
Before I go into this seed and agriculture inputs issue, to be very honest about it, there is no direction so far from the government side in terms of agriculture credit, agriculture input supply, and the logistics movement, and including the labor movement, etc., for the ensuing Kharif season. Absolutely no direction so far. So whatever that we say now is going to be kind of a speculation. But what we know for sure that the March and April and the May, these 3 months are extremely important for preparations in terms of your seed production, processing them, or even your production of fertilizer, then storing them, or even dispatching them. A lot of fertilizer movement happens during this month of April and May to different parts because have that much of storage space. So they keep on sending the material to the different destinations where it will be delivered. So that I don't know that whether that is disrupted. Most likely yes, and also probably the production has been also disrupted because of this. Not all the plants were running in full capacity during this lockdown period. But then we are yet to hear from the Ministry of Fertilizer, Chemicals, and Minister of Agriculture about the agriculture input scenarios, how it is going to be tackled in for Kharif. But before that, I would like to say a few things about this the current scenario. Sanjeev, I mean, the point is there is no one can make a very definite suggestion at the moment that how it is going to the rebooting is going to happen and everything is going to be business as usual over a period of time, because the current scenario is such that it is still unfolding and no one knows that in which direction it is taking us. So whatever that we at the moment say, it's a kind of a makeshift arrangement, or we can say it's a kind of a jugaad kind of economy that we are talking about in rural areas. First about this, what Ashok rightly said, that there is a lot of distress sale going on with the wheat, and wheat is this time the wheat and chickpea both were a kind of a bumper production, you know, and it is same if the farmers are selling the wheat at 11 or 12 rupees. Ashok is very correct. 11, 12 rupees kilo, or 11 or 1200 rupees per quintal, because I was looking at this, because our producer companies, they enter into this wheat procurement in a large scale, and they supply to different mills. So the mill's price in and around Indore at the moment, the mill delivery is something like 1860, 1850, like that, which means that the farm gate level price would be not more than about 1500 rupees a quintal, whereas your MSP price declared is a 1925. We all know that MSP is not universal. We all know that MSP has its own limitations, but we also know that MSP is an instrument, a kind of price correction instrument through which government controls a kind of market price of the commodity, and government procures about 30-35% of it. What I thought that government should have done, I mean, there's still a lot of time they can do it. There was no reason for the farmers to do this kind of a distress sale. Government could have actually activated their cooperatives. There are hundreds of thousands of cooperatives. The primary agriculture cooperatives are operational. Then there are community institutions, then there are gram panchayats, then there are farmers organizations. All are available. Government could have activated these institutions to procure from the farmers, if not a procure, just to provide the storage space and provide the warehouse guarantee, receipt guarantee, by activating the local banks. The local banks are flush with money. The banks, there is no liquidity issue with the banks. They have a lot of money. So they could have actually given farmers the kind of a 60-70% of their commodity value in advance. That could have actually helped farmers to address their liquidity issue at the moment. And then when the market stabilizes, the farmers had the options to go and sell it in the market. And government could have actually taken care of the working capital interest as well as the storage cost. I don't know why the government is not doing so. That is something government would have actually done a good job by saving farmers from this distress sale. Now, coming to the next point about this, if there is anything that can be done at the rural economy at the moment to kind of help it out, as nothing but give them money. The cash flow in the rural areas is a severely disrupted and skewed. So one has to do something to give them money in their hand. How do you do it? You dole out money. If it is required to dole out money, let's do it. Because I'm not very comfortable that the MG NRDJ will be that effectively implemented that the money can be dissolved. You try that as well. That's no problem. But then you do something to give money in the hands of people. You ensure that there is a kind of a food supply available to everyone so that nobody goes hungry. And these are immediate measures that need to be taken without any further delay. That's my two suggestions. And now coming to your inputs thing.
Yeah. Hello.
There's going to be a lot of this is again a speculation. There's going to be a lot of crop change that might happen this year. I was hearing the other day, the finance minister of Punjab was saying that they are not expecting the Jharkhand or UP or the West Bengal laborers to come back for their paddy transplantation. So they are thinking of changing from paddy to cotton, which requires, of course, less labor. Similarly, the small farmers, whatever seeds that they have, the home saved seeds, which are basically the composite varieties, which would be like, you know, your paddy or the like, you know, maize or black gram or
Good,
your
Ashish. I think your voice is breaking.
And all other crops, that they will. Sorry. Is it better now?
Yeah. But I think you have made your point. So I would just put you a couple of questions. There is a great deal of anxiety that is being expressed through the Q&A and other points in the chat box about what's happening on the seed flow, the flow of seeds from, because there's a peak time for kind of sorting, grading, packing seeds and moving them towards the consumption areas. What is happening on that front?
I don't know. As I said, there has not been any direction so far or any kind of information available from the ministry, agriculture ministry or the National Seed Corporation or the state seed farms, from anybody. But what I know, that the state seed certification of Madhya Pradesh has lowered their quality parameters this year from the 70% of germination to 65%, which anyway tells you that they are expecting going to be shortage of supply, and they are basically in a way telling the seed suppliers that even if your quality is poor, but come in. It's a kind of a, you know, I mean, that's what there is already a notification by the state seed certification agency of Madhya Pradesh that tells that, you know, I mean.
The second question which I wanted to ask you, Ashish, was is the livelihood mission getting into action? Is it providing any support to people? Because you know, the state livelihood missions are formed in all the states and so on, and you probably know about Bihar and Jharkhand and you know, Madhya Pradesh, where your teams are working. So what is happening with the state livelihood missions? Are they kind of dormant or they are active, or what is happening? Hello? Livelihood missions.
Yeah, about Madhya Pradesh? You wanted to know about Madhya Pradesh?
Yes.
Yeah, about Madhya Pradesh, I think they are engaged in relief work to some extent, and also mobilizing their self-help groups for mask making and distributing. The panchayats who are buying the mask from the SHGs. So I believe the NRLM mission in Madhya Pradesh, they have done a good job in terms of, like, you know, activating their SHGs for mask making and distributing at the village level. Beyond that, I think they're of course involved in some kind of relief work, but I don't know whether they're providing dry ration or food packets or anything of that sort, or anything in the agriculture space.
Right. So Ashish, you suggested cash flows in the hands of people so that they can start doing something connected with their agriculture and of course the food supply. Both these things, the government of India has said that they are doing it, and we don't know whether to what degree of adequacy and what degree of fidelity of the ground, but I presume they are doing it. What I would like to do at this juncture is to move over to Sanjeev Asthana, who has a much more intense engagement in the produce supply chains. You know, he used to head Reliance Agro, and since that time he knows about the supply chains in the produce market, whether that be the perishables or the non-perishables or the grains and so on and so forth. So, Sanjeev, what is your assessment of the produce market as of now, and what's happening there? What's the kind of distress at various levels in the supply chain, you know, right from the farmers up to the millers and so on and so forth?
Right. So, am I audible?
Yes.
Okay. So, good afternoon.
And we can also see you very well.
We can see you.
Okay, that's perfect. I'm doing it on the. I'm using my phone. So I would just sort of lay down the quick as a context while everyone says that, you know, they're like really seeing that what is going on. But in my assessment, you know, perhaps what we also need to see is that truly at all India level, really where it is headed. And I've just picked up two sort of sectors to build my argument. One is on the cereals and oilseed side, and the crops which are getting harvested, and the other one is on the horticulture side. And then I try and link it up with the FCI, this whole distribution of grains, the food distribution as it is happening, as to how this is playing out. So two bits. A, that the government was sitting on a stock of nearly 35 million tons of wheat and rice as we speak today. And every month, as per the regular program of the PDS and TDPEDS, what they were running, they were distributing about 2.5 million tons of grain every month. So which would have taken them the whole year to even last out. So in terms of the availability, it is pretty good. On top of that, I'm reasonably certain that we will have a procurement of 35 million tons, which the government is going to do now for the wheat harvest. And then you have again the Kharif harvest of paddy. So in terms of the availability of food grains for distribution, there is adequate and more food available. I think the one question is that what sort of cost it is being done. So, on food, we give a subsidy of almost, 1,36,000 crores. So if we are doing, government is committed basis, 5 kgs per family to 80 crore people. So typically it would come to about 2 million tons of additional distribution, what they will do now. So my estimation is that while the announcement was for 3 months, this will have to get extended to another 3 months more at the minimum, if not more. So which effectively takes it to about 25 to 30 million tons of distribution happening within 6 months as we speak now. But availability, the efficiency of distribution, etc., I think government has a wherewithal to be able to manage that. So the procurement also is an issue, where I think states like Haryana, for example, on the wheat procurement, they've already announced it that to the producers that there's incentive if you get it late. So which means that if you get this wheat, what you're harvesting now, you bring it in May, we will give you 100 rupee incentive per quintal. If you bring it in June, there's another 100 rupees. And so that modality is worked out. My suspicion is that this probably will get announced by all the states. So with the key being that the current gut slot harvest, typically with the farmers bring it in, will somehow get calibrated to that extent. So it will be okay. The issue really on wheat and largely on the, and to some extent on the rice side, is that the government has really killed off the private trade with the large amounts of, and which is not a legacy of COVID-19, but really it is perpetuity which is going on for the last several years now, where they've crowded out the private trade completely, with the result, and I'll come later to that, that the role of private sector in the supply chain efficiency, which is really the dominant part of the distribution for this country, is almost 1.2 billion tons of agriculture what gets produced, is really almost at negligible level where the cereals are concerned. But when we talk about horticulture, we'll see that it's almost 100% is the private sector. So I think that is one part, the supply chain actors, how they're getting impacted, and how that is both distorting the markets at consumer level as well as the farmer level. I think that is something which we need to seriously consider. The second issue is on the side of the couple of other crops, like maize, for example, the prices are down substantially. And the reason being that, they were running at 18 rupees a kg last year. Now they're running at 12. So clearly the poultry sector has got hammered in last month and a half, 2 months now. And the demand revival seems still some time away. So clearly that is going to be a problem. And on top of that, you've got the, transportation cost. So from Bihar, for example, if the transport used to be 150, if it goes to 450. So what it has done is, and this is in crop after crop after crop, in horticulture, in cereals, in oil seeds, that the moment the supply chain gets disrupted and the cost of transportation goes up substantially. So farmer at one level is getting a lot lesser value for his produce, and the consumers are paying much larger value for the produce. So really that it's not that it's getting cornered by the middleman. It is simply that this discontinuity in the supply chain. I think that is something which is, in my view, a top priority with the government has to fix, where the involvement of the private trade very quickly, other than the sort of stopgap solution of giving the free grains, they will have to see that how the supply chain gets revived by this whole sort of framework of, the transportation, logistics, middlemen, etc. They have to quickly come. Chana is pretty okay. For example, mustard, again, the pretty much same issue as maize, that, the prices used to be 44 rupees, they're 35, 36 rupees. The transport cost being very high, so farmer is getting lower. The consumers end up paying higher. So really, there are a range of issues around cereals, which has to be dealt with with more alertness now. And I think we need substantive solutions beyond that free distribution of grains. So that's one bit I would submit, for everyone's attention. The second issue is that on the horticulture side, and I think that's a much more serious issue. So, for example, the cost of growing bananas is about 6 rupee 50 paisa a kg. It's a more or less. I mean, you can give and take 50 paisa either side, but that's broadly the cost. The price at farm gate is running at about 250 to 3 rupees a kg. So clearly, and on top of that, the supplies coming to the market, for example, are very low. So that is one part, which means that it is left at the farm gate, highly perishable. So the ability of the producer to hold it to get a better price later is very limited. Apples, for example, the prices which last year per box in Azadpur Mandi used to be 1100 rupees per box is at 700 rupees. And for the lower varieties from 800, it has gone to 400 rupees. But the key issue is that what 100 trucks used to come every day to Azadpur Mandi, they've dropped to 200. So really it is getting stuck back in Himachal and Kashmir and all that. So the transportation to the destination mandis has virtually stopped. Same is the story for grapes, it's for watermelons, vegetable, the supplies are down to 50%. I checked with a couple of people at Azadpur Mandi really in terms of what is going on. So the arrival at the same time, and which incidentally in several other groups I've been saying that this is what we need to truly check. That if you look at the larger mandis like Vashi and Azadpur and Kota and look at mandis in South, that truly what is the arrival versus last year at the same time? What is the arrival versus the previous month and this month when the gut slot, the peak harvest is picking up? So Azadpur, for example, it is just about 20% arrival. The second issue is that the redistribution which used to happen, so when it comes to mandi, then it gets redistributed back to the smaller retailers and pushcart vendors and, this whole sort of very massive distribution architecture which has built up over decades. That part has absolutely collapsed because of issues of, the tempos being stopped, the smaller trucks being stopped, the distribution not happening. And that is causing a problem. Now, my issue is that linked to this, if you look at the international supply chains, for example, the exports of basmati rice and rice from India, it's almost completely a standstill. If you look at to the markets like Middle East and others, so it has come to a complete standstill. While on price level, you will find that prices will look good. But the point is that unless the money flows into the system, which largely happens either through the exporters or through the, the commission agents, the traders, the retailers and all that, that gets into a big issue. And the other issue which is also happening is that just as a brief sort of aside, the international supplies of DAP, for example, with China and DAP, like China and Canada, the big supply phosphate producers, I think if government has to look, 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, 18 months down the line, what kind of disruption is going to impact on the availability of the inputs, like Ashish spoke about seeds and a couple of other areas, my sense is that it is going to be an issue. So really what could be done and, what truly is going on right now, I think if I to look at, the revival bit of it. So for example, one issues on the food security front is at a very basic level. It does address, wheat and rice getting distributed 4.5-5 million tons a month by the government. It does meet the expectation for, let's say, 80 crore people, but India has another 40-50 crores. How does the food security really get assessed and managed in that sense? So issue may not be the availability in the country overall, but as we all know, the last mile distribution, is it going to the ration shops? Is it reaching the, the mills? Is it reaching the retail points, etc., for the efficient distribution at the right price? I think one large issue government will have to check out as to how exactly that is going to happen. The second issue, which I briefly spoke about in terms of the bandwidth, what the FCI and the state distribution has. So my sense is not a large issue. I think government has the wherewithal of staggering the procurement. So clearly, while there might be some very basic level of suggestions I may have, but I think that part is not such an issue. But I think truly the three bits which I would recommend strongly with the government can look at. One is that how do we, and I think we need to just put that into respective slots, really, that how this entire thing will revive. One is that how does the farmer, what kind of support it can get in terms of procurement. So it's easy to say that government can buy the, perishable, but it's impossible. So the only way that can happen is that some very massive stimulus to the private trade as it operates at the farm gate level, as it operates at the mandi town level, as it operates at the Azadpur mandis, and then the redistribution mechanism which is there, I think has to be provided because the money has got really stuck in the overall system. So that's one bit. Second is on the trade itself, that, this whole architecture of the people what we have, that how do they get, whether it's the interest-free credit, because the easiest way to manage this process will be to really fund the trade. And the government has a pipe, so they have the availability, they've got all the bank accounts, and they've got the ability to do that. So they have the means and availability to really fund this middle sort of segment, which continues to support. And I think that's just incredibly important, for this thing to get started. The third is at consumer level, this big hit which is happening, that you may have a distortion at the consumer level where they're ending up paying high prices. So for example, in Gurgaon, you buy an apple which is 250 rupees a kg. But if you go to the farm gate level, it is running at 40, 50 rupees a kg. So really, it's not getting eaten up by the middlemen. But really, that can this value go back to the farmer? And the only way you can revive it, the supply chains have to get well oiled, things have to starting to get moved, and this must get going. And I think it will have a big impact.
Yeah. Sanjeev, you have made some brilliant points and pointed at the intensity of the problems caused into the disruption of the because of the disruption in the.
Can I take 30 seconds more? Just 30 seconds. I was just finishing this. Just a quick 2 more points. And last part is the whole part of the regulations bit. So for example, there's a lot of talk going on that mandis ought to be allowed to operate outside of this one. Really, what has happened, we don't know. But I think right now there are 2 sets of measures at the regulation level government can pick up. And one is that very massive immediate set of actions what they need to take, which I think is on supply chains and regulations, really free up and infuse capital into that system. And the second one is the longer term play in terms of structurally changing some of the things, because this impact in my assessment is not going to go away in 3 months and 6 months. This is a 12 to 18 months sort of window in which this entire spectrum of actions will have to be taken. Only then things will start to look good.
Right. Thank you. I got a few questions, but let Vinay wanted to come in for a minute. So Vinay ji, please.
No, I just wanted to say that, I think it's great that we are seeing some of our panelists responding to the questions that people are asking directly, which I think is a good thing. We can reach directly the people. I just want to let everyone know that this is the second series. This is the second webinar in our series. And coming Saturday, we have another webinar on the same topic, but the effort would be to look at rebooting rural economy from a more macro policy perspective. And so request all of you to please sign up for that as well and do come for that. We also have a micro site that we have developed for these webinar series, and would invite you to visit that site. You will have details about the organizations behind it, different speakers, their backgrounds, and the recorded version of the entire, all these webinars would be available. So I just want to mention that. Yeah, Sanjeev.
Questions to you, Sanjeev ji. Sanjeev Asthana, my questions to you are 2, really. One is you talked about the need for freeing up the regulations and B, to financing the trade in order to kind of oil the machinery so that the whole process of trading of the commodities starts. This is one. Now there is a big ideological challenge there. We have been given to understand, ever since I went to my school, which is about 50 years back, that the government cannot trust the private trade. To what extent will this ideological barrier, and I'm sure half the listeners in this crowd, who the people who are listening to us, would be sharing the same view that you can't trust the private trade. So to what extent will this ideological barrier, how can this be tackled? This is the first question. And the second question which I have in my mind is, do you see this as something that will usher in long-term changes, in the sense that there will be more investment in local level processing, more investment in local level warehousing, things like that, cold storages, and so on and so forth, which would kind of delay the impact or delay and buffer the impact of such shocks to the rural economy? Do you see that kind of a thing happening over a period of time?
So, sir, 2 parts. I think really government has no choice, because I think the role of the government in both procurement and distribution, the food part, is negligible in our country. At best, it's about 45, 50 million tons a year. what we produce is some more than 1 billion tons of ag produce. Of course, a lot of it gets kind of settled in the rural areas. So I think private trade is the one which does the entire distribution of food in this country. So clearly, government may have whatever ideological barrier, but the fact remains that they are the ones who are sort of distributing, managing, and driving it. And I think within certain controls and this one, they'll have to look at. My sense is that the government is extremely practical. I think do understand. I think the issue fundamentally might be that we are used to talking at very macro level or extremely micro level. I think the fact remains that, detailed assessment of these issues and as they're understood and driven, I think would certainly help and make government make the appropriate decisions about it. And I think that's something which has to be convinced. And I think people like yourself can play a big role. I mean, we all do in our own ways of talking to the government in terms of what it can be done. But I think that is something which is of prime importance. So really, ideology may not be such an issue here. I think the fundamental part be practically the implementation, practicality of this issue as to how this gets driven. So that is one. In terms of the question of whether the big ticket investments will come in, I don't believe they will come in at all. And so I'm just being straight and frank on this, because the two reasons drive this, there are two reasons for this. One is that the whole regulatory architecture of India is very archaic. And despite all, one step forward, two steps forward and 5 steps backwards, I think we've seen this happening now for decades. So till we have fundamental changes happening at the, at a constitutional level between state ag as a state subject versus the center being sort of funding the money, but state managing it. And I think the second larger issue being that ag being seen as the point at which there's a lot of capital, both political, economic, and social sort of change part which is to be done. So I don't believe any large-scale private capital will come in. I think till we fundamentally and structurally remove the issues at the ground level and truly allow that. So yes, you will have, but getting a 500 or 1,000 or 5,000 crores of investment is not required. India needs $50-100 billion of investments in infrastructure, farm gate processing, transportation, efficiencies, quality, etc. So I think we are very far away from that space right now. So I think truly, but that's a different issue altogether. I don't think it's linked really to the COVID. I think right now, structurally, if the government can sort out the immediate stress by doing what we have discussed so far, and then look at structural changes in an independent way, I think that probably will be the right approach for this.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, Sanjeev. It was very
Thank you.
Really. I am going to shift to the other Sanjeev in the panel, which is Sanjeev Kumar, who runs the very well-known, beautiful organization called the GOAT Trust. As you know, the GOAT is the kind of running cash reserve of the poor. And he runs the GOAT Trust, and he has contributed a great deal to the economies of the small householders and the goat rearers. And he brings in this animal husbandry perspective. So, Sanjeev ji, I would like you to address this issue about what sort of distress is the goat rearer and the other animal husbandry people are facing, and what is to be done about that. And the markets are in disarray, distribution channels are in bad shape. So what are the input problems? What are the output problems? What are the rearing problems that you see? And what is the importance of the goat to the rural economy and so on? So over to you, Sanjeev Kumar. Hello. Sanjeev ji?
Yeah, my voice is audible?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks to all of you and all of listeners, in fact, and now talking about livestock in general. Basically, we have to understand that we have not locked down only the people. We have also locked down the livestock. 525 million livestock also is feeling a sort of lockdown, because the whole services has been somewhere getting disrupted now. If you look into livestock, I mean, it's a cash economy source. It's not the percentage only. You also have to understand the critical role. It's not always money. It's the money when you get it. Livestock has been a cash income source in India, and it's across the seasons, regular income. Agriculture income comes into a cycle, but livestock income have both, especially in milk and eggs, you can have a regular income. So what we perceive last 2 months, and it started, if you see the whole livestock industry of India, and I will classify large livestock, small livestock, and poultry. Especially in large livestock, we have problem of course, marketing. People who have coming back to after migration, and somewhere somebody was managing in his home the livestock, but now the input coming for the livestock. I take an example of breeding because no, we shifted to centralized system in recent last decade, and even the breeding has been centralized, artificial insemination, and if you feel those AI type of thing, now the LN2 stoppage which is required to keep those FSD, frozen cement dose. So the whole things have gone into a problem, and this is breeding season for large livestock now, as well as small livestock, and as well as the marketing season. I perceive this whole problem when I interact with the people. I find the one thing they have is that they have not stored feed for a longer period. India didn't. I mean, your own household, the human food itself is for a short period. So how we can even think of having animal feed for more than say 3 months or 200 days. So the thing is, wherever the livestock was dependent on external food like cattle feed supply, things are into trouble, and even the ability and affordability also, because the cash flow, the wages has gone drastically low, almost nil. So there is a problem, especially those who are small agriculture landholder, and we have to understand this agriculture phenomenon. I mean, there are almost now 60–70% people with less than 1 acre of land, and those have livestock as another source of livelihood. So that's a sort of problem people are facing. Their agriculture crop, of course, has been in the field, and livestock income is also not up to that mark. Especially in a small livestock like goat and sheep, we find they were largely grazing animals. They used to graze 5 kilometer, 10 kilometer normally. But now this whole psychological phenomenon, they are not aware much about the people. The grazers are not very much aware people in this country, and normally they didn't get interest into politics and all things happening. But this is first time I saw first. They are also gluing to listen the others. What is this corona and what this is? On 16th, 17th and 18th, when I asked this in remote village in Aurangabad, what is corona? He said, I didn't know. Nothing he was knowing. But last study we conducted with 2,000 livestock farmers. Now this is one of the fear, and animal should all get also contagion. A lot of also myths happening because they are not on digital media. So I'm afraid about those conditions where the information is not going right way, and they are into that kind of trouble. One is the psychological, second coming into the input supply, and especially small livestock is a much safer zone because still they go and graze. They didn't have any cost as such out of pocket, so they are surviving well. The one of the important part now coming to marketing. What happened in livestock marketing is it's largely traditional and a physical aggregation. Somehow this, as it seems, not today, even for next 1 month or 2 months, the physical aggregation of the livestock will not be allowed in the country, it seems. And the condition in livestock hard, it's such a filthy condition anywhere you go. It's much, even any heart, if you go, you could capture its 18th century perhaps things is happening, everything in open, lot of even the water logging are there, all bacteria and that seems a great problem in livestock marketing because now this is season for goat. They normally kid in October, November. So 3–4 months kid they normally sell. And now the market is already not visible for them. So that seems to me, and that is realized by most of them as a typical problem just now, and we need to shift. So the coming back to the solution, I would like to be brief on that. Just 3 solutions we need to understand. First, of course, the marketing part, trade, we cannot leave the trade like this. It's one of the largest trade in the world of livestock we have in the country. When we talk about India, we talk about almost 97% of Asian livestock is in India and China. So when it started on China and the livestock, somehow that is not coming.
Hello. Your voice is gone.
We find we only discuss largely crop and all this, but this is my humble request to all audience to understand and also to think around why we livestock always forget. It's such an integrated part, especially with the small livestock, small small agriculture holding size people. But somehow the debate about livestock, I didn't see is coming into the main media still. Only the milk, of course, your own product milk, that's well regarded. But what about the meat industry? When we closed all this, we have seen what poultry has done. But the next big thing will happen into goat and sheep. And the diseases, if any disease is spread into through this time, there is no alternative system. So what we are trying to do is building, I would see the key word is decentralizing the services. Let rural people have their own access to services, at least parallelly, have on their system of...
Hello.
Oh.
Hello.
Hello, is it okay?
Yeah.
Working?
Good.
Yeah, so to conclude it, I would say the decentralized system for the rural poor in this country, especially in livestock, used to be on the top of hills, sometimes desert, where nothing can reach. Even the government systems and power will take a lot of time to reach there. So alternative sustainable system needs to be streamlined, and COVID gives a lesson to manage our livestock. We cannot, everything we cannot centralize, especially people's own choices gets, starting from, of course, the breeding and all that. But now, this time, we've seen the markets also be decentralized. So that's my suggestion. And digital training. You will need a training. There will be not a training now, access to knowledge in a group. So we are afraid at the Goat Trust how we'll train the people now. So we are shifting to digital platform, and there are not enough investment in livestock farmers education program in the country. Still, there are very few platforms to looking into that. So I would also urge this platform, just three things. One is, let us understand livestock as a part of integrated rural livelihood. Use this opportunity to strengthen it, make it a digital learning platform, and let their trade of livestock also need to be alternatively organized. We propose it should be some virtual e-commerce and all that. So a lot of youth, lot of people in NGO sector, social entrepreneurs need to focus livestock. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. You really have kept to time. Sanjeev ji?
Yeah.
Okay. So we have had input from all the four the panelists. Vinay ji, would you like to come in at the moment? Any comments you have? Vinay ji?
No, I think it's been a very, very informative, presentations by all the four panelists. What I would probably propose is we could probably ask a few questions that we have received from the audience. But I also want to say that we have received so many questions and such detailed questions that we will have to respond to them subsequently. And what we propose to do is we will respond to them and post them on the microsite that we have created for these webinar series. So we reach out to you in that fashion. But yes, for now it will be good to ask a few questions.
Right. So what I'm going to do is to quickly kind of try and grapple with whatever people have told us in this, but the four panelists have told us, try to make sense of that, and then take some of the questions which have been shared with us in the prior to the seminar beginning and now. See, what we started with Ashok Kumar, who told us about the dire stress which the individual smallholders are facing. He also told about a little, the very, very stark reality of the terrible marketing situation which the producers of the perishable goods such as watermelon and vegetables, etc. are facing. He also told us about the issue of the migrant labor coming back, causing perhaps oversupply, migrant labor going away from prosperous agricultural zones like Malwa, leading to a labor shortage there and so on. So the picture is a little complex. And he told us that yes, the social safety net of food supply, etc. is reaching, cash is reaching, but there's no talk at all about the revival of the agriculture credit system and things like that. Ashish talked a lot about the issues which are being faced by the people, and he told us that there is no, at the moment, no direction, which is a very worrying thing. No direction about the input supply system taking up and going ahead. And he told us that, in fact, the standard for quality of seeds to be sold to people are kind of being lower standards are being tolerated. Sanjeev Asthana talked somewhat pessimistically about, I mean, he was optimistic in the sense that in the cross sense, there is adequate food available and that there is no issue at all. So there's going to be no starvation. So long as food can reach the hungry, there's not going to be no starvation. And even if the government has to give free food for 6 months, it's not going to be too much large number compared to what the agricultural subsidies as it is are. So that was the optimistic part. The pessimistic part was, we talked a great deal about the disruption in the system, and that led to huge price differences between what the farmers was getting on the one hand and the consumers were paying at the other hand, without anybody making the money in the process. I mean, even the traders are not making money because there's a huge disruption, and that disruption is caused by 2-3 factors. One is, of course, the transportation bottlenecks that are huge, logistical bottlenecks that are huge, lockdown, which prevents operations from taking up, that's also there. And of course, there's the need for money at every level. These 3-4 problems Sanjeev Asthana talked about. And Sanjeev Kumar, and please don't accuse that I was ignoring livestock. The very reason we got you, Sanjeev Kumarji, was we wanted to consider livestock as an important part of the rural economy. He was very, very candid in telling us that there are problems there. There are problems of input supply. The livestock itself is locked down. And while the goat is being grazed and so on, maybe the grazers themselves will be stopped from grazing their goats because they have to be at home because of the lockdown in the rural areas. And marketing systems are collapsed. And you were suggesting some ways to go ahead. So this is what broadly was saying. A few interesting questions that came up during the course of the talk which people were giving was, is it feasible? For example, is it feasible for the government to ensure lower delivery of inputs? Ashish, does that idea make sense to you? Lower delivery of inputs, is that feasible?
Do think it is possible because of the following reasons. A, that the fertilizer is largely delivered by our pack system, entire country. I mean, mostly it is the rural cooperatives. They supply the fertilizer. We do have a very decentralized seed and other input supply system. I mean, the network of input supply is even gone up to the very remote villages of the country, and they do serve. So and of course, despite the challenges that we will face probably with this, the shortage of supply for seeds and fertilizer, what is going to happen is basically hoarding, black marketing.
Yeah. Hello, we lost you.
Doorstep delivery is possible by giving connecting farmers with the whatever that the cooperatives available, or even the self-help group. If I mean, just a small point I wanted to make, if millions and millions of masks can be manufactured and supplied by the self-help groups, why can't this network be used for supplying agriculture inputs? Simple. You just have to activate your what is required is money. What is required is money, and consider about 20% of malpractices that will happen. You just have to take that into a factor in that, and then you do it possible. So I do not see that the doorstep delivery is a problem. It can be done.
Okay, Ashok, what's your view? Ashok?
Yes, sir. I also agree, sir. It is possible because we have seen the channels there. A lot of organizations working at delivering masks or food or even cooked food to the people in remotest areas. But adding to what Ashish said, we need to have a system to get the money back, because distribution is different and sale is a little different. So it may require good communication as well as a transactional process. Might be a lot of collectives will be useful here, whether FPOs or producer companies or SSGs or VOs can do some kind of can play a good role here, because they have transactional systems to deal with the transaction.
Yeah, but my understanding was that the government was moving towards direct transfer of subsidy to fertilizer subsidy to the farmers. Now that kind of a system is extremely difficult to do when you have proper digitization and things like that. Is it not? Ashish, what's your view? I mean, direct transfer of subsidy to farmers, is that feasible?
No, but Sanjeev, the issue is that with those who are already part of that system, they are part of the database. This is just like, you know, the way you transfer some general amount of 500 rupees to so many thousands or millions of accounts. The transferring fertilizer subsidy is also same. It's very easy. Problem is with those who are not part of the system, and they are also a significant chunk. They are about 50% of the people. They are not part of your system. How do you deal with them? I mean, you have a system of, like, let's say about a 3 lakh, 4 lakh crores worth of money goes through the KCC, and they are linked with the bank. Reaching out to them is not a difficult thing. But how do you reach out to those who are not part of the KCC, not part of the cooperative system, not part of the other system? Maybe they are part of the SHG system. You can identify them and reach out to them through your SHG and other networks, APU network, SHG network. So reaching out is possible. And for them, you don't have to do this digital, I mean, the back-ended subsidy. You just give a bag of urea or bag of SSP or bag of DAP to them, straightforward.
All right. All right. Now, what is in the realms of possibility and what will actually happen may often be two different things, because what currently is happening is everybody is preoccupied with what they consider saving life. From saving life to smooth operations of systems is a huge jump, and that is where we are all getting stuck. Would I be right in saying that? Any comment on that, Sanjeev Asthana?
Yes, sir. I think you said it appropriately, and I was trying to allude to that. So the two sides. One is managing the three things, in fact. One is our immediate response to the COVID-19 crisis as to how that is getting administered. All my submission is that the policy response today is very immediate relief, and only that. But the fact is that while this immediate relief is being provided, there is a much larger structural challenges which are building up, which will last out at least 12, 18 months. This is the time to be addressing, looking at those, thinking through that, and working around them. Otherwise, what may end up is you may just end up spending a lot of money for immediate relief, but what you could have simultaneously done the structural solution, that you might miss out. And then there is a larger part of a longer term solutions about direct benefit transfer and, nutrient-based subsidy on fertilizer, or how the DAP supplies will come, etc. Those are the other set of issues, or investments in rural areas. I would say that if we can distinctly address the first two and insist at the policy level, you cannot just look at next 2 months and 15 days, that's important, but please work after 3 months and 4 months and 5 months and 6 months. Exactly the same set of issues will keep surfacing, and they'll become worse at that time.
Yeah. Sanjeev Kumarji, you are very right to point out that goat is such an important, and livestock is such an important part of the livelihoods of the rural poor in particular. And within that also the attention of the policymakers and everybody is focused on large livestock. So this is the tragedy generally everywhere, that rural is has less voice than the urban, so to say. Therefore, rural is neglected. Within the rural, those who are small and marginal are neglected. Within that, those who hold the dairy animals are looked after, but those who hold goat are not looked after. And you have the combination of the rural poor here. The incomes are dependent on migrants. The incomes are dependent on the goat. How do you ensure that they are looked after, except by giving just plain subsidies? Is there any other way of bringing them with responsibility, with dignity into the mainstream? Sanjeev Kumarji, Ashokji, all of you can talk. You have been dealing with the farmers. My question, understood?
See, this the one class goat farmers who have not taken any subsidy last 100 years or 70 years of our independence. They have never voiced any subsidy and had most sustainable livelihoods they have practiced. Even the politically, if you find their way of resilient economy, the climate change, even the part of pastoralism or non-pastoralism, even backyard farming, everywhere they practice the best. But I don't know. I know, but I could not say it directly at this moment. But would like to express this is a political decision, as you know, in this country. their political voices is still not coming up. The one of the problem is when the market comes, these people, goat farmers especially, are not organized. So my one of the thing is, let them also get a bit of organized. They have collectively, because the statistics, the data, which didn't say those income which they earn from the goat. People didn't have the idea how much income comes to a village through the goat. But the two things have to be understood. One is the critical income, when you have nothing to sell. You cannot sell your agriculture land for your son's, say, medical or admission in a college. For a poor farmers, they sell it a goat or poultry or something like that. So coming back to your question, I would say once they get organized and they can develop a system, the market, which is no data is available, what is the role of their in the economy within livestock. So I personally perceive when the data is available to researchers, to academicians, to people, things will organized and will have much better policy impact. And that's why I say now let us go to virtual marketing. This COVID has given a silver line in dark cloud. Now people will have to realize the migrants. I can assure you, the last day I visited, around 7 of migrants had said me directly, I will go for a goat. Because the type of investment, the low cost of investment, they didn't have fund, and the other factors, a bit of quick repayment, quick income they are looking for, because it's a 6-month cycle. So I perceive that once the data is fed to the system will change.
Okay. Ashok ji, any closing comment from your side?
No, I'm good. Thank you, sir.
Okay. So Vinay ji, over to you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. I think it's been a very, very stimulating discussion. As you were speaking, we were still getting questions. I can see this question which is coming on, subsidies for people who are, breeding goats, and some people are questioning that. So it's very interesting that we are getting a lot of questions. We are absolutely thrilled and encouraged by the kind of response that we have received so far in these 2 webinars that we have conducted. I would strongly recommend that please visit our site called villagesquare.in/webinars. You will have a lot of stuff. Recorded versions of the webinars would be available. You can share, you can go over them, you can write to us, and let us make it into a continuous dialogue, between the practitioners and thought leaders that we think about. Secondly, about the questions, as I said, we will organize all the questions in a manner that they are club theme wise, and they will be, responded to and posted on the website. So do visit the website. If you don't find any question that you've asked and has not been responded to, do write to us directly. And finally, yeah, Ashish, you want to say something?
Yeah, I just have a quick point I wanted to make. This lot of talk has been about the subsidy for this, subsidy of that. I personally don't like this word subsidy, because it's a very kind of an abusive word in our country. I would like to say it is an investment. It's a state's investment in its own people in a very bad time.
Okay. Yeah, very, very good point. I think I agree. So, and finally, let me remind you, can we have the advertisement for the next webinar up? So the next webinar is, as I pointed out, is on rebooting rural economy, a policy perspective. It's on Saturday, 25th April 2020, 4 p.m. to 5:30 p.m. You can please sign up. We will be sending you, I think you should be able to sign up based on your signing up for this, but there is a link here, and please do sign up. You can see we have lined up a fairly impressive panel, so who will be able to give you a very diverse perspective on a variety of areas that affect rural economy with policy perspectives. So I'd like to again thank all our panelists for their support and we will continue to engage with you, and we value your time and your effort in this. Thank you all the participants for joining us, and thank you Sanjeev ji for being so liberal with your time on this, and our team and the who's trying to make this happen. So thank you everyone, and until the next webinar.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Pleasure. Thank you.
Bye bye.